Good morning, Super Bowl weekend, people. It's Friday. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's the 11th day of February 2022. It's 55 degrees and sunny here in Ventura, California, with a strong winds and heat excessiveness warning. And of course, it is Friday, which means Super Bowl Sunday is right around the corner. Time for the commercials. Yes, hopefully we will see some stuff in regards to the new Marvel projects coming up, the new Star Wars projects coming up, any of the new TV shows that we're interested in coming up, and of course the usual food and car and beer commercials and the puppies. And the midtime and the halftime show is a bunch of older rappers brought to you by Dre. Whatever. Eminem still sounds good. The rest, I don't know about. All right, what's going on in the Friday news? Are there any stories coming out that we missed since the last time we addressed the news? And there's a few, including a few misinformations floating around. So let's get right to it before we address, of course, the big story, which is the Critical Role latest hubbub. Wow, it's been a whole week. Okay, so there's a couple special editions out of previously published things. We have the Master the Index Card RPG Collected Edition coming out from, I believe, Mophidius is putting it out. Let's see. Yes, Mophidius. We have the Index Card, massive 400-page, $50 thing. So if you have any interest in Index Card RPG, this is probably the way to do it. I haven't picked it up yet, but I might pick it up as my February purchase to myself for Valentine's Day. And speaking of Hank, it looks like there's also a updated Viking Death Squad coming out that Hank did. This is sort of one of Hank's earliest home campaigns, something he's run over and over again. Now it's been all put together and in a big shiny book with glossy covers. And if you ever wanted to play in a role-playing game that was, War Pigs by Black Sabbath, where you play immortal Vikings fighting against darkness, you can pick that up now, and that's also probably being produced over at Mophidius. So congratulations, Hank. What else? And Beatles and Grimm has their complete character chronicles, big $50 books with art and information on the various classes and stuff. And basically, it's a big, really expensive blank notebook thing. Lots of companies do this. They take the blank notebook, and then they put a fancy cover on it, and they say it's a gaming journal, and therefore it's $50. And I'm like, dude, you can get the exact same thing at, school supplies for like $4. Okay. Anything else important going on in the news that we haven't talked about? Oh, yes. Let's address the 100-pound elephant in the room. The Wizards of the Coast makes $1 billion in 2021. Well, Hasbro made $1 billion in 2021. Because remember, Wizards of the Coast is part of Hasbro. It's not a separate entity. And I know J. Scott Garrity is spouting out his usual nonsense about Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast and Christine Williams and how, oh my God, 5th edition made $1 billion in 2021. Therefore, it's the single most important role-playing game that you need to be playing. Well, once again, of course, that is completely and utterly incorrect. First, Hasbro made $1 billion. Of that $1 billion, 80% of it was Magic the Gathering. Not Dungeons and Dragons. Magic the Gathering. And I'm sure the other board games and toys and whatever else they sold in 2021. But 80% of that was Magic the Gathering. Not Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Which means only 20% of that money was Dungeons and Dragons. And we also know that Dungeons & Dragons made less money last year in 2021 than it did in 2018, 2019, and 2020. In fact, it had a 15% drop in funds. Remember? So, yes, Hasbro made $1 billion in 2021. 80% of that was Magic the Gathering, not Dungeons and Dragons. So just get your facts right. In regards to Christine Williams, the new president of Wizards of the Coast, and her digital background, no, we cannot find any proof that she is related to Lorraine Williams, though I haven't traced her entire DNA. But yeah, I don't think haven't found anything saying that she and the infamous Lorraine Williams are related. If you want more information on Lorraine Williams and her history with Wizards of the Coast /TSR, there are plenty of individuals who have done major talks about it, including Shadzar, the Legion of Myth, Grim Jim, and others. So she is a corporate individual. She's been brought over to take D&D into the digital age and take Wizards of the Coast into the digital age. And, hopefully she's smart enough to see the direction Wizards of the Coast is going and change it before it gets worse. Unless, of course, she becomes assimilated and turns into a potato, much like Chris Perkins 2.0 or whatever. She said something recently that had a lot of people upset where she said, Wizards of the Coast created Dungeons and Dragons. That is, of course, 100% incorrect. Wizards of the Coast did not create Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons was created in the late 70s by an individual named Dave Arnson and Gary Gygax, and the name was theirs until the copyright nonsense. Now, she was maybe made a mistake, slip of the tongue, considering when she would have been gaming. It would have been in the Wizards of the Coast years based upon her age. So she could have just honestly not known that there was a Dungeons and Dragons before 3rd edition. Though, of course, it says 3rd edition right on the cover, so why would you think that it was the only one? Or she could have just been reading a corporate appropriate speech because, remember, Wizards of the Coast wants you to think that they invented Dungeons and Dragons, and there's absolutely no history to Dungeons and Dragons before 3.5, and they're trying to, of course, separate themselves from Gygax and ruin everything that Gygax created about Dungeons and Dragons. Whether you believe that or not, of course, is not up to you, not me. Obviously, we know my opinion of Wizards of the Coast is pretty much hasn't changed. They're just nothing they're doing makes sense in regards to D&D, but there's probably some alternate timeline where it does make sense. It's just we're not living in it. So in regards to her saying Wizards of the Coast invented D&D, no, they didn't. And if regardless to whether or not people are saying Wizards of the Coast has done the most to promote Dungeons and Dragons and make Dungeons and Dragons the most money, 4th edition would say otherwise, guys. So no, Wizards of the Coast has nothing to do with the cultural popularity and awareness of Dungeons and Dragons right now. That happened despite them. They had no control over it. It wasn't planned. It exploded. And they took advantage of it, but no, the fact that Dungeons & Dragons is so popular right now and so in the public eye has nothing to do with anything Wizards of the Coast. I mean, they really didn't do anything in regards to advertising 5e. Even the car ads they did for the Super Bowl were the old D&D characters from the animated cartoon. So yeah, they haven't really done anything to push 5e into the public eye. So again, another misappropriation of the facts on certain individuals like J. Scott. The popularity of Dungeons and Dragons has nothing to do with Wizards of the Coast. It has everything to do with a television show called Stranger Things. And then, of course, people finding out that Vin Diesel played D&D. And then, of course, Critical Role, bringing D&D more into the public eye, and other things like Critical Role bringing D&D into the public eye, and of course just the advancement of digital products like D&D Beyond, making D&D more approachable, and 2 years of being trapped in a house, which Wizards of the Coast had no control of, or is not planned. They haven't really done anything other than take advantage of what happened, but they're not responsible for the explosion in popularity of D&D, so stop saying it. And finally, speaking of Critical Role, apparently the fans are angry at them again because of cultural appropriation. What? And racism? What? And cultural insensitivity? What? Modern fantasy is somehow cultural appropriation? Everything is cultural appropriation. Eating a fucking hot dog is cultural appropriation unless your culture invented the hot dog. Critical Role's new campaign is based upon South Asia and Africa and the colonialism, and therefore they're, racist and cultural insensitivity. No, I hate to defend Critical Role, but it's just a fucking game. It has nothing to do with real life. And if that fucking game takes place in a fantasy version of ideas about fantasy the Orient, fantasy Africa, fantasy Mars, it has no basis in reality, and it has nothing to do with their political things. I mean, if anything, they've gone out of their way repeatedly to be sensitive about things, Okay, so also this article was written a couple days ago, and it's addressing things like, the new campaign that just came out. The campaign started in October. Okay, so this starts with a video they made in October about the intro to the new campaign, Campaign 3, which is, apparently heavily influenced by Indiana Jones mummy type stuff. We've got some of the, Critical Role people dressed up in like archaeologists. Here's one of them. Here's Laura wearing like a Indiana Jones pith helmet, and here's Ashley with a lantern, and they're walking through a dark cave. Laura's got a map, and she's wearing glasses. So, and the people are saying this attire might seem inspired by franchises such as Indiana Jones and the classic adventure serials that influenced those stories. But, oh no, those are charged with colonial stories for people of color. Yes, these costumes are functionally harmless, but they speak of a legacy of disregard and disrespect to colonized cultures, often robbed literally of their material heritage and ancestry by the outside explorer who represented a larger power structure. The desire to protect and preserve history in a museum is an admirable one, but even the most heroic and selfless of the fictional explorers in these classist stables is still stealing from the people indigenous to the foreign lands they explore. So Indiana Jones going into a pyramid of a culture that no longer exists is somehow theft, racism, and cultural appropriation. And then taking those artifacts that have been irrelevant for thousands of years and putting them in a museum where they will be preserved and the history will be respected and people will have a better understanding of what, like, say, ancient Egypt was like, is cultural appropriation and racism and inappropriate. Are the serials of like Tarzan and Indiana Jones based upon a historically inaccurate picture of what that last great age of adventure was like? Sure, it's just like the Westerns, Westerns and spaghetti Westerns and just Westerns in general are blown out of proportion fantasies. Stuff in museum was taken from other cultures. Some of it was taken illegally. Should the stuff that was in the pyramids been left in the pyramids just to rot away so we never know the history because it was cultural appropriation? Are there things in museums that were acquired with less than legal and less than appropriate ways? Sure. Did racism exist? Yes. Did cultural appropriation exist? Does cultural appropriation exist? This is America. This is an entire country based upon cultural appropriation. If there's anybody in the world who's gone out of their ways to be aware of the projection on our hobby and on fantasy right now, it's the cast of Critical Role. They have gone out of their way to kowtow to everything the SJW hypocritical Critical Role fans have demanded them. More representation, more people of color, more wacky voices, more, people who are LGBTQT, more this, more that. Each successive production has gone more and more and more to try and appease the fan base. And the fan base continues to be hypocritical assholes and attack them. Is the latest campaign based upon a fantastical image of cultures that no longer exist? Ancient Egypt, ancient Africa, ancient the Orient? Sure. Is that cultural appropriation? Is eating a hot dog a cultural appropriation? Please do me a favor and go through your house and take out everything in your house that was somehow appropriated from another culture. Starting with shoes. Shoes were neither invented in America, nor are they made in America. Those $300 kicks you're wearing were made in a factory in Korea. So, yep, get rid of your shoes. Shirts and pants, yep, those have got to go. Those are appropriated from another culture. Makeup, oh yeah, makeup. Definitely not an invention of America. That was, appropriated from African cultures, Asian cultures, indigenous species, American Indian cultures. Yep, that got to go. Let me see. What else is in your house that you need? Bagels. Cultural appropriation of the Jewish culture. You got to get rid of your bagels. Refrigerator. Oh, the idea of keeping food cold so it preserves longer. Again, created by a different culture. Let me see what else. Flush toilets. Oh, yep, that's got to go. You got to get rid of your flush toilets. Those weren't invented by your culture. Chances are your mom and dad are genetically related to people that migrated to America from another country. So you are an example of cultural appropriation. That jewelry you're wearing, that expensive watch, well, that's got to go. The watch was invented by cultural appropriation. Let me see. That TV show you like the cop drama or the romantic comedy or whatever it is, all based upon Greek tragedy and Greek comedy. So you can't watch TV anymore because it's cultural appropriation. Literally everything you own is inspired by a history, inspired by a culture, because America is a country based upon cultural appropriation. And God forbid we reach a point in the history where I actually have to defend Critical Role and say you're being fucking overly cynical idiots and the usual hypocrites that the Critical Role fan base are. But just, God, it's just a fucking show that they made to make you happy. And they did everything they could to create another show to make you, the fan base, happy. They continue to go out of their way to kowtow to the woke agenda that is constantly being forced upon them to live up to these unreasonable expectations you place on them. And once again, you attack them. So no, it is not cultural appropriation any more than anything else in the world is. And if everything is cultural appropriation, then nothing is. So shut the fuck up. Anyways, I have been your guide to all the things tabletop role-playing game news, weather, sports, and apparently we finally reached the point in life where I defend Critical Role. God help us, the OGGM. If you appreciate the content that's coming out of my mouth, let me know. If you don't appreciate the content that's coming out of my mouth, let me know. Except, of course, you can't, because that would be revolving you responding on the computer, which was invented by a different culture, as was typing. And that would be cultural appropriation for you to respond. Oh, and the idea of responding to critics also goes back to the ideas of Greek tragedy and Roman tragedy and Greek and Roman comedy. So yeah, you can't do that either. So yep, you can't respond to my videos. Otherwise, that would be cultural appropriation. Because writing, again, invented by other cultures. So yeah, sorry. See ya.